Hello and welcome to Guru Please, the show about pushing the limits of life and stepping up to live with more meaning, more purpose, and more passion. I'm your host, Jessica Sun. I'd like to introduce Marc Johnston. Marc is a marriage expert and co-founder of High Thrive Coaching. Through failure and losing nearly everything, he's come to recognize failures as a springboard to success. His signature programs help a single spouse save the marriage on their own. Welcome to the show, Marc.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Jessica, for having me.
Yeah. I wanted to start off by asking you, what is that failure that you mentioned, on your site? I'm very curious to learn how you got to where you are now.
Well, it's interesting, So you mentioned that, as the co-founder, and both my business partner Heather and I both went through some big things in our lives. I can't speak for her quite so much. I mean, she's not here, but for me, I was on track to have a very specific career. I was going to school for psychology. I had everything planned out. I was ready to finish grad school, and I already had my job lined up. And this was really, really important to me. My wife and I, wanted a big family, so had had several kids, and I think at the time, we were on our fourth. We have five now, and so I really needed a good, solid career to be able to support everyone. What ended up happening? It was probably like thinking about 3-4 weeks before I was set to graduate and get going with everything. I was finally feeling like, okay, struggle is over. I don't have to go to school full time and work full time and have another side job on top of that. And I let the stress get to me, and I made some mistakes while at my internship. And I'm looking back, do I feel like it was a little bit harsh? Yeah, but I ended up getting dismissed from the program. Mm. I remember sitting there. I was trying to work through some problems myself with therapy. I was in the program for psychology, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this with therapy. And so I was like, okay, I'm getting a handle on things, but to be at that point and have everything kind of crash down around me was devastating. When I heard the news, I remember I sat in the parking lot of the school for hours. I just sat there. I didn't know how to go home to my wife and explain to her that, okay, this isn't going to work now. Of course, I tried to appeal and do a few other things to kind of get around this. And there's a lot of people in my corner. Felt like it was unfair, but the program director was a bit hard-nosed about it, and ultimately she had the final say. So here I was, trying to support a family. And so because of that, I got to about $90,000 in student loan debt, and with no job prospects. And imagine that's, and then, having to have a family to raise.
Right.
So there I was, and I ended up having to, get a job. I got a job at a warehouse. So I was getting up at like 4 a.m, working at this warehouse job, feeling like, okay, this is just terrible, because I felt like I was highly educated, highly qualified, and had nothing to show for it because I didn't have that piece of paper.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was this spectacular failure where I just didn't know what to do with my life at that point. Luckily, I'm here now speaking with you, and things have turned around quite a bit.
Right. And I can't believe you were working at a warehouse. I mean, of all things, it takes a toll on the psyche, I think, to know that you're much more capable. Not saying that it's, a bad job.
Oh, of course not. No, my coworkers there were great people. I was much more valued there for, how much I could lift rather than, the kind of ideas I had. And it just didn't feel very fulfilling, especially after spending years. The graduate program was grueling. it was a longer master's degree program than is typical. So I spent 3.5 years in addition to the bachelor's degree. And then, so it was quite a bit of education.
Yeah, so almost 8 years. Right,
Yeah,
exactly. It just seemed like a mismatch, a complete
exactly.
mismatch. Well, tell me about what got you to this place now.
So honestly, what took me out of it, I was in a really bad place. Mentally, I was depressed, and luckily for me, I had a really supportive wife, and she saw how unhappy I was, and really, she started working on herself. And this is to a certain extent how I came to start the program. Like you mentioned, like we're talking about fixing marriage problems, relationship problems on your own. So my wife Jennifer, she started getting into law of attraction type principles. If people aren't, I don't know who the audience here is like, but, things like The Secret or Tony Robbins and a lot of the
Hmm.
other people like that. And at first, because I had come from a more traditional psychology background, I dismissed a lot of that. I was like, okay, here's science stuff, and then here's this kind of wishful thinking. And the more she got into that, the more and talked with me about it, the more I started to buy into some of those principles. And basically, it's if you set your sights on something and you really work well towards it, if you really want it enough, there's a lot that can be done. So we started off not even knowing what exactly we wanted. I knew I wanted to use my education. I knew I wanted to help people. That was really what was driving a lot of this. Is I wanted to be able to make an impact in other people's lives, and it felt like I didn't have a way to do that. So I went about figuring out, okay, how can I do this? As I said, my wife is usually 2 steps ahead of me in this regard, and so she, kept in contact with friends of ours, and one of them being my current business partner Heather, and got us to talking about some of these principles, and we ended up deciding to form a company together.
Ah, okay, I see. How was it for her to kind of be there with you? Because that takes, I imagine, just a huge leap of faith to kind of stick it out and say, right now it's tough, but it's gonna really get better and turn around.
Well, the big thing between my wife and I is it's never been necessarily about what we get out of our relationship. It's never been this idea of, well, because you can't give to me right now, then you're no good for this. We've both her and I have both gone through experiences that have been rough, and we've been there for each other. I and to have that kind of solid relationship has really meant the world to me. To know that even if I'm going to struggle, she's going to be there for me, and vice versa, is huge. Is this huge relief. For her, she's been open with me about it. That's one of our strengths, is we are very, very open with each other. And she said, it was a struggle, seeing me in, a really poor place, but she knew that, she tells me that she knew I had a lot to give, that, she props me up quite a bit. And she says, I know you're a very intelligent person. You have a lot to give. And I think there's more here than just, working some warehouse position, or, working some minimum wage job. And so really what pulled me out was a lot of her belief in me.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I really think that, that kind of relationship is so precious and it's something you need to work for and cultivate and nurture over time.
I mean, we've gone through our own struggles with, working so hard to get to where we were at. I felt like that really put us in a good position to, weather a few more bumps, because we had been very open about our communication and our struggles and how we felt. It allowed for some ways to deal with these heavier issues. That's, I think, what really did is really the struggle, having struggles made it easier, if that makes sense.
Because you had seen this kind of thing before. It wasn't your first storm.
Exactly.
So you've coached, hundreds, thousands of people in their relationships, in marriages. Can you tell me what you see, like maybe patterns you see and things that people may not be aware of that they're doing in relationships, either with a spouse or just a romantic partner or friends and family?
I was just talking with a client about this the other day, and she was relating to me an experience that she had early in her marriage. It was, I think on our honeymoon even, and she related this experience where she said, "Hey, I don't think that they had spent the night together. They were a religious couple, and they wanted to keep that kind of situation there. And so she said, "Hey, when we wake up in the morning, I just want you to be really nice to me. I want you to tell me that that I'm beautiful." And the story that she related, she said, he turned to me and said, I don't want to lie to you, and I don't want you to, I don't want you to change who I am." And immediately I said, "Oh, here's this red flag here." And she kind of paused and she asked me, "What do you mean?" This sort of, we got into talking about this, but this sort of example here, while many of us would say, "Oh, that was such a terrible move," I think a lot of us don't really realize the little jabs, the little disappointments that really have a big impact on our spouse. It's not that people in relationships are necessarily terrible or selfish or anything. Many times there are good intentions behind a lot of things that are said or done. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't real problems, things like abuse or infidelity or whatnot. But for the most part, people go into a relationship with great intentions and just not a whole lot of uh, perspective about how they, how the other person might experience them, how they might react to what you say or do, whatnot.
Why is that?
Well, no one has really taught this. Even me, my wife and I, before we got married, we took a pre-marriage class. We thought, okay, we're going to do this right. We're going to take this class to make sure that we have a healthy relationship. And I'll tell you, looking back on it, it was junk. It didn't really teach us anything. It was taught by well-intentioned people from our church, and nothing against those sort of things, but it's just no one takes the time to really learn this stuff, and no one really takes the time to teach these things because we just kind of figure, oh, it should happen. I'll say that the big downfall of many relationships is one of two, or it could be both of these things, but a couple things. It's usually about not having a proper avenue to express in a healthy way your concerns and problems and have those addressed, or not having a healthy way to be able to meet your needs, to get what you want. Now, this might sound a little bit contractual, but if you're not getting what you need over enough time, it does tend to tear apart a relationship. And this sort of thing, like the example, the story that I related there, it kind of set this course, this concern with my client, I'm not good enough. And as she tried to express this to her spouse, it kept being dismissed. It kept saying, "Don't worry about it. You're not, this isn't a big deal. You need to stop nagging me about this. Why do you keep bringing up problems?" And it ended up causing a lot of other problems down the road.
Yeah, maybe because he didn't hear what her concern was. Like he heard one thing, but she meant another.
What was coming, the specific interaction that was going on is she would bring up this problem. She'd say, I'm really feeling like I'm not valued, I'm not appreciated or respected. And he was hearing it as, okay, why does she have to complain about this? We're doing okay. We're fine. Why does she keep having to bring up problems? And once again, I don't want to paint the husband here in this negative light, like, oh, he made all these mistakes. If we come at it from his angle, I could probably come up with a reasonable explanation. We could say, oh, at the end of the day, when he's done with work and there's a lot of stress, he doesn't want to be attacked right away. And, her approach could have been a little bit off. And once again, it's about having proper, healthy ways for these sort of things. And ultimately, with that couple, that's, what we had to talk about is, okay, if there are complaints and concerns, how do we go about this? How do we make this okay?
Like, what are the tools and techniques that you use or help other people use when they realize that this is what's happening?
So for me, I had to really think about how to systematize this, because that's how I work. When I was trying to decide on a career, oddly enough, I was deciding between psychology or engineering, and I feel like I almost look at relationships almost mechanically. It's a little bit weird. So I was like, okay, well, what is going on when there are these problems? And eventually I came up with what's called our PATH program. It's an acronym here, and I'll admit it's a little bit shoehorned into the acronym, but it stands for
It's okay.
perspective, adjustment. The T is telling a new story, and then H for hope. And that's usually where I start people off on is, I want to make sure that there is that perspective, that compassion and understanding for each other. Like I said earlier, there's usually a good intentions behind a lot of actions, even if it's like, I need to protect myself or I need to feel security. And that's why that partner, that person in the relationship might be lashing out. And we really need to help there to be that understanding. The adjustment or action needs, there are real problems, and we need to figure out a way to actually, eliminate those problems, get rid of those sources of pain. For a while I was stuck just on that. Like, okay, why aren't relationships getting better if we offer a lot of understanding, we fix the problems, why aren't they getting back together? And that this third part of this telling a new story, or really adjusting the narrative, was kind of our key. What I found is that a lot of times the spouse or the person in the relationship that's distancing themselves they'd have a certain story they'd be saying. They'd say, hey, if I come back to the marriage, I'm going to get hurt again. I can't trust this person. This isn't going to go well, and I need to take care of myself. It's a set of beliefs that kind of tells a story about what's going on. And so we needed to dig into, okay, how do we help other people see things from a healthier point of view? How do we adjust that story? And then the last bit, that hope, is a lot of our focus on mindset. In our programs, we really like to bring in a lot of those law of attraction principles, the healthy mindset, working on yourself and making sure that you are your best version of yourself as you try to mend a relationship. And so having that hope, having that mindset, having that positivity is a big factor as well.
I see. So this isn't a step-by-step. It's all four of these all at once.
I usually, most all my trainings, I'm tying it back to one of these principles. It depends on the program that you are getting into. We do have kind of a more or less a step-by-step process. But yeah, if I'm working personally with a client, I really like to dig in there and see what's going on and see where they need more help. A lot of times they'll need help in some areas rather than others, and they need help taking action or communicating, or they need help really telling that better story themselves and really identifying what needs to be adjusted there. So it's all custom once they, work with us personally.
I really like that approach of like that engineering mindset where you are creating structures through which you see, like lenses through which you view what's going on, and you're able to identify, oh, this is the limiting belief, this is where you maybe need more hope, so that you can create a system around it to help people. And what's really interesting to me is that your program is really for people where one of them wants to heal the relationship and wants it to continue, not both of them. Tell me more about how that works, because isn't it true that you need both people on board for a relationship to work?
I hear that same question many times. So to a certain degree, yeah. I mean, you do need two people to make a relationship work. But like you said, many of our clients, when they first come to us, are there by themselves because in many cases, their spouse has gotten to a point where they might be wanting a divorce. And so here, this bomb is dropped, and our client, comes to us and says, "What do I do about this?"
Mhm.
Well, so in those sort of circumstances, there's a lot of guidance needed. It's gotten to a point where it doesn't matter what the willing spouse does; it might be viewed as negative, and they need a lot of tools to help, like, put out those fires, reduce the tension, help the other spouse to see kind of the good in the situation. Really, a lot of the work that we do with individuals is calming things down and helping the hurt spouse to feel that safety, that security, that understanding, the sense that things can be different. Now, I will say that in most cases, if we can get to that point there, we have a spouse who's much more willing to work on the relationship. And certainly, I really encourage that with my clients. If we can get their spouse on board, then it makes things 10 times easier
Mhm.
for any further progress.
Mhm.
But a lot of what our program does is it kind of helps that one willing participant to really get things to a stable place and get it to the point where they could have their spouse's involvement.
I see. So the one who starts it is kind of laying the groundwork for a better relationship with the other one.
Yeah. I mean, it's much like I was saying earlier, like when Jennifer and I were really struggling, I was not in a position to really take our relationship forward, our family forward. I needed a lot of support from her. And a lot of where we are today is because Jennifer laid that groundwork for us and made made it easy for me to step up. Now, does that is maybe a little bit unfair on her to have put her in that position? Sure, it's not something that we can, that we could actually ask of our spouse all the time. But she was willing to be that person to take those steps first. And this is a bit what we're asking our clients at times is, okay, let's actually take a look at this logically. Let's see what pieces are missing, and let's see if we can add some of those pieces in and lay some groundwork to make it easy for your partner to step back into the relationship.
Yeah, I see. So you're extending that hand and saying, "Hey, if you want things to change, I'm here. I'm ready. Are you ready?"
Yeah, exactly.
Do you usually see things turn around pretty quickly, or how long does it take? How much of a process is this, and how often do you see it?
So I will say that we see some changes very quickly and bigger changes take a little bit of time. So things like opening up communication and reducing tension and talking about problems. A lot of the people that we help don't have any of those things. They're not able to talk with their partner hardly at all.
Mhm.
And we can get that open up, in a matter of a couple weeks, maybe. So then from there, like I said, the big challenge is this narrative that the spouse who's leaving has built up. If I had to put it in other terms, bringing some of that psychology background into I'm thinking specifically of in cognitive behavioral therapy, the theory there's kind of this idea of core beliefs or intermediate beliefs, like these deeply held ideas that have been developed over a long time. And those sort of things, this idea that I'm not safe within this relationship, I'm not, I can't go back to this, I'm going to be hurt again. These ideas that have developed for months or sometimes years are a little bit harder to shake. I have specific tools to target those things to help the partner who's a little bit hesitant now that some tension is dropped and now that there's more communication, help them to feel a bit more of that security, that sense that they can drop some of those more firmly held negative beliefs.
What are their motivations to drop them? Because these beliefs are in place to protect and to make
Hmm.
sure, X doesn't happen again. Yeah, how can they be sure that things have changed or the other person has changed?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. You talked about motivation there. And certainly, I recognize that in many cases when someone has gotten to a point where they're saying, I'm done, I want out of this relationship, it's probably because they see a solution elsewhere.
Mhm.
Sometimes this is a relationship with someone else. Sometimes it's just having a sense of freedom. And that other solution appears to them at the moment easier, more accessible, like it's going to solve problems, as opposed to coming back to a relationship where there'd be quite a bit of work and hardship and some amount of slogging through all the mess to
Mhm.
get back to anything happy. So I like to help my clients have some sort of hooks, something to get the interest of their spouse. I talk to them about finding common goals. A lot of times, when someone's saying I'm leaving and their partner is saying, well, why don't you come back? It's almost like you're butting heads. You have opposing goals. The partner who's leaving isn't saying it, but they say, I need freedom and you're trying to keep me from having that freedom. I'm wanting happiness. You're trying to keep me from that happiness.
Mhm.
And when you have those opposing goals, you're going to be fighting uphill. There's very little chance of you actually getting your partner to cooperate with you on anything. And so oftentimes I try to help them identify, okay, what does the person leaving actually want? And, divorce isn't what they want. It's not leaving. That's not what they want. Those are a means to an end. It's
Mhm.
something that they're doing to get what they want. And so, as I help them open up some communication, we can say, okay, this person really wants freedom. Okay, well, what does freedom look like? What would that actually mean to be free? And we can usually get into it. It means that they're overwhelmed, they're feeling stressed, they're looking to get away from some problems and not have someone disapproving of their choices. So we get into this and say, okay, your job now is to be the kind of person that really supports their choices and their ability to live their life. All these things, we're trying to position our clients in such a way that they can actually provide the things that the partner who's leaving is looking for. I mean, this is just one of the tools, but
Mm.
certainly it's something that makes it easier to get there.
Okay. What does the ideal relationship look like? Because it's impossible not to butt heads once in a while.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
we all will make mistakes along the way because it's all a learning process. So ultimately, what does that relationship look like where things are pretty good?
Jessica, I'm going to give you tell you a bit of a secret here. So
Hmm.
I talk with people about relationships every day.
Yeah.
And you know what? I still have arguments with my wife. Like you said,
Hmm.
no one's going to be perfect here. Um, Now, what makes it okay between Jennifer and I? I'm not going to pretend like we have this perfect ideal relationship, but I'm going to say that we have it pretty good.
Hmm.
I like the principle that John Gottman teaches. And if you're not familiar, John Gottman is fairly famous in terms of marriage research and whatnot. He talks about the most important skill in a relationship is the ability to repair. So when damage has been done, does that relationship have an ability to come back to like a good position? In my relationship with Jennifer, certainly that's one of our strengths is that we will have fights. And then afterward, we come back and we say, you know what, I'm looking at this from your perspective. I can see how you came to this position. Let's make some adjustments. Let's change things. In terms of an ideal relationship, I would say that they have that sort of ability, that ability to fix problems when they have come up. But I don't like to just define things in terms of eliminating problems. I would say that's important, but an ideal relationship is also a relationship where you feel better because you feel like a better person. You feel more than yourself because you're with them and they feel the same from you.
Hmm. Yeah. How do you know that this person is the one? Because you can just as easily say, oh, well, there's so many other people out there, it's very hard to pick one.
Oh, absolutely. That for me personally, I have a whole lot invested in my marriage, and so there's a whole lot to say that this my wife is the one. Could things have worked out with other people? Probably. The thing is, there's never really any telling, if someone is the one, and I actually kind of don't like that idea. I think that given the right skills, given the right mindset, many people could have a very long-lasting, fulfilling relationship with lots of people.
Hmm.
Personally, though, and after looking at, working with many, many couples, really examining relationships, I do think that we trivialize relationships a little bit and say, well, okay, any person could be substituted into this position here. It's okay if I get a divorce, I'll find someone else that'll be just as good. And my opinion here is that there's a lot to be had in maintaining a long lasting, deep relationship. I feel like I am more in love with my wife today than I was 15 years ago when we got married. And the way things are going, I anticipate that I'll be even more in love with her when we get to our 50th anniversary.
Hmm.
I Not to toot my own horn, but this is after many years together, my wife and I were out in a public setting, and it's not like we get this all the time, but it just felt nice. A friend came up to us. They were passing by. We were at a park, and they came up and commented to us. They're like, I see you guys together, and if I didn't know better, I would say that you guys were newly married and deeply in
Hmm.
love here. And it was this nice reaffirming moment, like, hey, I still got this. My point here being, if done right, if done well, I think a long lasting committed relationship can offer a lot more than substituting someone in and out of that same position. You can still
Hmm.
have that excitement and love along with the deeper understanding and acceptance and commitment and security.
Because over time you've just built layers and layers of trust and just
Mhm.
reinforce that, and that's why it's more fulfilling.
Yeah, I will say that in many cases, a new relationship, trying out someone new, does have some advantages. There's certainly excitement in not knowing where the relationship is going to go, not knowing whether this person really likes you the way that you do. There's excitement there, and there's excitement in finding out new things about this new person. And certainly it is easier to have that excitement within a new relationship. I will also contend though that it's, with some effort, you can still have a lot of that excitement that a newer relationship has. You can still have that in a more established relationship if you do it well. So the one advantage there is not exclusive, I think, to new relationships.
Ah, okay. We just need to maybe make it happen, plan for it, and be aware that we can do that.
Sure. I mean, I keep referring back to my wife and I, because like I said, I think we do pretty good. Sometimes we have to plan for. It sounds odd. Plan for some spontaneity.
Hmm.
Plan for a little bit of spice and whatnot. And we've come to a point where we say, no, that's fine. It's okay to be. And actually, it feels great to be able to express that need to my wife and to be able to get some support and having some of those needs met, or vice versa.
Because you can recognize when you feel like a need come up and just have that open communication about it and kind of problem solve together so you're on the same team. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to learn about how you coach because you're looking at relationship problems every single day.
Hmm.
And I imagine that can take a toll in terms of seeing conflict. You're the mediator. You need to go in and help. How do you deal with those feelings and not burn out?
I remember running into other people kind of in the mental health field, and I was just about to get ready with started with my career, and they had heard what my line of study was, and they said, "Oh, you know what? I was in mental health, and I'll tell you, find another avenue. You're going to burn out." So, I mean, it's a very real concern. I get why you asked that question. For me, I think it's a very personal sort of thing. For me personally, it's odd. I almost feel like I have to have this wall up. Like here I am, uh, delving deep into people's problems, and I'll have someone who's saying, "I've been, married for 30 years, and all of a sudden my husband wants to leave me. I have no idea what to do." That's crushing. It sounds a little bit cold, but I honestly, I can't get emotionally invested in these sort of situations. Certainly, I mean, I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't want to help people, and I really wanted people to see some results. But I have to have some of those walls up now to make this work. I have to communicate these sort of things quite a bit with my wife, saying, "Hey, I just need to be able to sit for a moment and not talk about anything serious." I know when I was in school, another thing that was really emphasized for a lot of us was, how do you take care of yourself mentally? For me,
Hmm.
I need to have time where I'm not thinking about anything seriously in the evening. So which is good for us. My wife and I have a routine. We put the kids to bed at like 8 o'clock, and after that, we are no longer parents. We'll tell the older kids that stay up a little bit longer. We're like, we're not mom and dad anymore.
Oh, that's nice.
If you have a problem, you need to figure it out, unless someone's arm is missing or the house is on fire. And so that's our time to connect with each other. I find it really recharging to be around my wife. But honestly, I need time to myself. I play video games in the evening, and as long as I have that time to myself to relax and recharge, I'm good for the day.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that is important to make sure every day you have time not only to connect with her and then just for yourself and disconnect for a time.
Hmm.
I think our minds need to disengage, and then when we come back to it, we're fresher.
I'll add something else into here. One of the big things that I took away from that time in my life, it was a big failure. I've recognized that I also need to take time each day to consciously choose how I want to feel. So I do have time set aside each day, and it's nice having my own business and setting my own schedule so that I can say, okay, I'm going to take this half hour right here, and I'm going to use that for meditation, and I'm going to use this for mindset work. I have a specific thing. It's called our morning formula. Heather and I invested really heavily when we were getting into businesses, into like personal development coaches, and one of the ones that several of the ones had variations on this, just going through a specific exercise to really get myself in the right headspace each day. I
Mhm.
also think is a really important thing that's led to me being able to cope with this.
So what is your morning formula?
Oh, I could even I'm even pulling it up right now.
Mhm.
It's almost like, it's almost like a vision board, but
Mhm.
much more detailed. So I have it on my computer here. It's right in front of me now as we're speaking. And it's about 25 or so slides, almost PowerPoint type thing. But it goes through different things. It's like it's a mix of, say, affirmations or trying to really sit with a certain feeling. I do have quite specifically a vision board, all sorts of different pictures on there,
Mhm.
including being interviewed on on programs like this is part of my vision board, and getting
Hmm.
out there. But it has a lot of like what I want for myself, what I want to think about myself, my strengths, the rules that I live by, my values, and what I'm imagining my day to be like. And I walk through that, and by the end, I feel like, okay, I got this all together. I got it handled, and I know exactly where I want to be.
Yeah, it reminds you of who you are and
Mhm.
really maybe puts the images to mind of what you're doing each day.
Exactly. Yes.
Very cool. I was actually just about to ask you, like, how do you develop yourself as you continue your work?
So I do have that specifically. I take time for my own personal mental well-being is, I think, a very important thing. But even beyond that, I incorporate my own development into my business plan. Every month I'm developing a new training for my clients, and I use that opportunity to develop this new training to go into research, to really examine other experts' thoughts on different subject matters. I look into our Facebook group. We have something like 35,000 people in our Facebook group, and we have about 150,000 in our email list. And I dig into those different sources and see, okay, what problems are people experiencing? And I go through my notes and I say, what problems are my clients experiencing? What gaps in my own program am I seeing? So, so if I keep seeing the same problem over and over and over again with my clients, I know, okay, here's an area where I can fill this in a little bit and learn a little bit more and systematize this so that I don't have to keep solving the same problems with my clients over and over again. And I think that's a big part of at least my own personal or professional development.
Well, yeah, it's both. You use your business to kind of dive in and figure out, okay, what does this mean for myself personally, and then how can I use it? It's like a really beautiful positive feedback loop.
Oh, exactly. You know what? One of the reasons why I was really like this was the area that I wanted to work in, specifically psychology, and then later on, even more specifically, marriages. Is I was like, I'm going to be spending a lot of time with this, and I wanted to say what is important to me in my life. And even back, I was married when I was still going through my undergraduate degree, and I was like, what is important to me in my life? And it's my family, it was my marriage, and so I wanted a career that would really support that. So yes, what you're saying is, for me, that was really important. Is having a professional development that would also impact my life personally.
Awesome. I think that's really amazing that you've been able to figure that out and create this for yourself. And it wasn't even that long, just a few years since everything happened, right?
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think about it. It's been about 4 years now since we first had kind of the inkling of this idea, and I think partly because Heather and I work well together, and we've really thought this well out. We've really grown quite a bit in just a short amount of time.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Mark. I think a lot of what you said just really applies not just in marriages, but how we relate to ourselves and how we can use our relationship to deepen our understanding of ourselves and our own needs.
Absolutely, it was my pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.